Thinking about this angers me. Who writes like this? Today we're going to talk about books. I don't even know what to say. I was making book videos consistently. Like every month I was doing all the books I was reading, wrapping it up, keeping it real. Sometimes my reviews were a little rocky, other times they were great, but I was doing them. And then like October hit and I just gave up. I gave up, but here we are today. I'm just here to talk about the books I read in January and move on with the day. So that's what we're going to do. We still have like about 4 or 5 days left of this month, so I can definitely finish 1 or 2 books, but if I do, I'll just tack it in at the end. But for now, like, let's just talk about what I read. The first book that I read was The Memory Police by Yoko Agawa. It is a translated work. It was originally written in Japanese. I'm not even gonna guess when it was published originally because I actually don't remember, but let's talk about it. The Memory Police is essentially set on an unknown island off the shore of an unknown location, and every so often the inhabitants of this unknown island experience what they call a disappearance, and it's when an item or something of some sorts, it could be perfume, it could be a music box, it could be a bird, goes missing, right? And they feel the essence of the disappearance, but they start to lose a sense of the thing that's disappeared. And for the most part, you're supposed to forget everything about the items that have disappeared, except for those people who don't. The main character is a writer, and her editor is someone who doesn't necessarily forget. He's not affected by the disappearances. So the plot of the story is basically the main character hiding her editor and writing her own story at the same time. So you have the general plot of the book, and then you have another plot that's very neatly woven into the story. In that book, you have a typist and a typing student. This typing student kind of gets involved with their typing teacher, but this relationship is very twisted, eerie, and obscure. Very strange things happen, and ultimately it kind of reflects on the greater issues within the society where the disappearances are taking place, because within the story of the main character, something disappears and is locked away forever. You'll have to read to find out, because I was kind of like, what? Yeah, the story is very obscure, but yeah, it was really, really good. It was very slow, and I felt very much present in the story. Like, it was when winter came, I could feel the cold kind of wrap around me. The words were so descriptive, very immersive. I thought that Agawa did a beautiful job of just capturing the reader, the audience, which in this case was me, and I really, really enjoyed the story, although I don't think it had like a great, okay, we start here and we get to here, because things just take a turn for the absurd as you get to the end of the story, and I just kind of had to grapple with that, because I was like, okay, what now? Like, is something else supposed to come? Like, is this supposed to be inspiring? Because it's not. Like, what next, you know? So that bit of a cliffhanger kind of left me a bit unsatisfied, but I think the story in itself was well written. I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I read was just a turn for, it was something very different, and that is Red Queen by Victoria Aviar. I think I got this book in grade like 7 or 8 or whenever it came out years ago. And for context, I'm in my 3rd year of university, so this has been on my shelf for a minute. Let's start with its premise. So in Norda, which is the land, empire, kingdom, whatever you want to call it, or I guess whatever it's called, there are 2 kind of castes of people or demarcations of society. You have the red-blooded people who are commoners. They were born to serve, and their lack of abilities or powers are evidence of that. And then you have the silver-blooded who are elites, they're nobles, essentially the royal family and their descendants perhaps, and they have silver blood as they're named, but their silver blood also means that they have special and unique powers that could be regarding the elements like fire. And then we have our main character whose name is Mare, and she is here to shake things up. Unintentionally though. She gets sent to the palace, and as she's serving there, due to unfortunate circumstances, or fortunate depending on how you want to see it, she ends up discovering in the presence of many other silver royal families and nobles that she has powers. And that is a problem because she is red-blooded, and as you can imagine, that would really undermine the system of silvers are meant to rule, reds are meant to serve if a red-blooded commoner is actually gifted. So that's kind of where the story takes off from, and to hide the secret, the royal family takes Mare into the palace, betroths her to one of the princes, and passes her off as a silver-blooded girl who was, I don't know, long lost, missing, noble family daughter, whatever. I don't think any of that just made sense, but like, you get the gist. I was disappointed. People hyped this up for me, and it did not do what it came to do. But chapter 26 definitely took things for a turn. Definitely a plot twist. I gave this 3 stars just because chapter 26 took me for a loop. I was surprised. Okay, the next book that I read, again, different vibes, but that was The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I think most readers who like literary fiction have read The Bell Jar, or if not, it's probably because it deals with very difficult topics such as suicide, mental health. I'm just gonna put that out there right now. Very dark topics, and if that is kind of a trigger, I would say don't even bother to read it or even consider it. The story revolves around Esther Greenwood, and she is this beautiful, brilliant, very intellectual woman, and she has so much potential. The story, I can't really say has too much of a plot because the narrator who's struggling with mental health, kind of going through life, and that in itself is a very cyclical and twisty, kind of confusing. I said cyclical and then I said twisty, which might be a bit of a contradiction, but in the case of this story, I think that's the best way to describe what's going on. I thought Plath did a fantastic job of conveying what mental health could look like. The Bell Jar, in a sense, is a fictional biographical account, so it may be, you know, fiction, but it has a lot of aspects of Plath's own experiences and struggles. I just thought that the writing was exceptional. I gave it 4.5 stars. Again, not for everyone, especially if you're dealing with mental health, but it was really, really well done. So this is Happily Ever Afters by Elise Bryant. Our main character, Tessa Johnson, is starting at a prestigious art school, and she's very excited because she finally gets to do what she loves and do it for school, which is writing. She's a writer. She writes romance novels or books or short stories, only for her eyes and her best friends though. So going into school and writing and having other people assess her work is kind of new territory. And on the first day of school, she is met with the worst writer's block, brain fog. She can't write whatsoever, which is obviously a problem because half of her curriculum is writing, and suddenly she can't even formulate words to say what she needs to say. So essentially her best friend helps her devise a plan. Perhaps if Tessa can fall in love, she can be inspired to write a love story again. So this really cute, popular guy at her school named Nico is the object of her attraction, and she is going to try to get him to fall in love with her and fall in love with him so she can write a romance again and get on with her life. Except things don't go exactly as planned, as you could probably imagine, and a couple strings, emotions with different people kind of get involved. I thought this was so sweet. This was sugar, this was spice, this was everything nice. I love Tessa's character, and I really liked Sam as well. He is just such a sweetheart. I gave this 4.5 stars. No, I gave this 5 stars. Wow. I gave it 5 stars. The next 3 books that I'm going to talk about are on the shorter end, so I'm just going to run through them pretty quickly. But the first one is Offshore by Penelope Fitzgerald. This is my classic of the month. At the beginning of the year, I made a couple of reading goals. One was to read 90 books. The second was to read 12 nonfiction, and the other was to read 12 classics this year. I read all my Jane Austens, and like one Bronte, but to be honest, I haven't read that much else and I really want to read more. Granted, my classic of the month is not even on my bookshelf, so I kind of just decided to read something completely different. Nonetheless, here's my classic, Offshore by Penelope Fitzgerald. Sounds like I'm about to start reading this to you, but no. The story is set in the Reach, and that's kind of like a boat house community where different eccentric personalities all live together. I'd say in a sense they're almost ostracized from the greater society that they're actually living in and have cultivated their own systems of interaction and community. It's kind of fun, and each character has their own very distinct, very large issues to deal with. That's kind of what we're dealing with throughout this short story. The book definitely ends on a huge cliffhanger, like does he not? I don't know. I guess that's kind of the point, to keep us wondering. But yeah, but I give this 3 stars. Yeah. The next book that I read was The Embassy of Cambodia, which is by Zadie Smith. And I just wanted to dip my toes into the realm of Zadie Smith. I'd heard quite a bit about this author, but I wasn't really sure if it would be for me. I've tried books by authors that, you know, are well known and well liked. Emily Glasgow, and I really hated it. So I just wanted to be sure this time. The Embassy of Cambodia basically follows the perspective or the narrating voice of Fatu, who is an immigrant and a domestic worker. And the story just is a deep dive into this character's life. It is a short story, so as deep as you can go in shallow waters, really, but you get really great conversation about immigration and what it is to be an immigrant who's qualified to work higher jobs, who's educated, but not to be able to put that to use. Like, you can't actually utilize your education because you're just not afforded those opportunities in the place that you have immigrated to. I gave this 4 stars, which I'm sure I really liked it then. And the last of my, you know, rapid fire round is Violets Bend Backwards Over Grass by Lana Del Rey. It's a poetry book, and I was pleasantly surprised. This was nothing that I ever expected to read from Lana Del Rey. I don't really listen to her music. I don't know too much about Lana Del Rey. I just know that music is a thing that she does. I guess if you can write songs, you could probably write poetry. I should have put 2 and 2 together, but I did not. And when I read this, I was stunned, to say the least. I was completely shocked by the atmosphere that I just stepped into. The book was very much eerie and also filled with desire and sadness, but also joy and need and desperation and a bit of anxiety and panic. It was incredible. It was definitely an experience. Read it, please, because I think this is a new favorite. I give it 5 stars. And like with poetry, ooh, that's rare. Oh my gosh, okay. The book that I read is, or the trilogy that I read is the Burn for Burn trilogy by Jenny Han and Siobhan Vivian. This was an experience. Let's start there. Let's start with the first one and work our way back. I usually talk about a trilogy as a whole because I don't want to spoil anything, but this time I'm going to break it down for you because this needs to be broken down. We have 3 girls, 3 stories, 3 revenge plots. It gets crazy really quickly. Lilia is still reeling from the weeks before, a party that turned friends into foe. Kat is frustrated by a relationship that could have been, but is not. And Mary is dealing with rage and anger from a past darker than you can imagine. Together, these girls orchestrate a plan to execute revenge and what they consider justice on the 3 people who have hurt them. This is fast-paced, it's thrilling, it's anxiety-inducing. I give this 3.5 stars because I enjoyed it, but ultimately I wasn't obsessed quite yet. The second book in the trilogy is Fire with Fire with Fire, and this was my absolute favorite. I said I gave the last book 3.5 stars. I gave this a solid 5-star rating, and that's because the revenge plot started to focus in on 2 characters in particular, and it got very personal very quickly, but an unlikely romance kind of comes out of this, and I was here for it. I can't even express how excited I became when I started to see these characters have this relationship just develop, because wow, talk about character development, talk about someone becoming a better person. It all happens here, man. Then I picked up Ashes to Ashes, the final installment of the Burn for Burn trilogy. What on earth? Talk about a story that had potential. A, third installment that could finish in the most immaculate way. This had no plot, no direction. At some point, it just became us, the audience, witnessing characters being tortured, abused, assaulted, harassed for no good reason. There was no longer a reason. It was just pure rage. Oh my gosh. And also, what happened to the fact that there were 3 storylines? 3 distinct storylines. Lilia became the only storyline, which I wasn't 100% angry about because I like Lilia. She's my favorite character. I liked Lilia. But at the same time, every time I read about Lilia, she was suffering. So, I was like, I want to read about Lilia, but I don't want to read about her suffering. And then Kat just disappeared. And when Kat popped in, she was also suffering. So things were not making sense. And then Mary, every time I just heard that girl's name, I just threw the book away because at that point I was over it. I was over it. This got 2 stars for me. All right, let's move on to the second last book. This is Home is Not a Country by Sophia Hilo, I believe her name is pronounced. And this is written, first of all, in prose, poetry, very beautiful. So this story is literally poetry. That's what it looks like. But it's a full-on beginning, middle, and end. It has a story. It's very distinct, very interesting to follow. I kind of want to read what I wrote about it because I want to be as specific as possible when talking about this, so I hope you do not mind. Nima wonders what life would have been like if her father was alive in America with her and her mom. Nima wonders what life would have been like if she was Yasmin, bright and loved. Namita wonders about things that are not. Her desire to be who she isn't and dream up a life that cannot be leads to an unexpected turn of events. A supernatural turn of the tide sucks Nima into the past, where she is confronted with the identity she thought she wanted. So that's kind of my synopsis of this. I did not expect this to become, again, a fantastical, magical, realist kind of narrative, but it definitely did. It's just such an interesting conversation. Truly breathtaking. I gave this 4.5 stars. I can't wait to read this again, and I would highly recommend that you do the same. And finally, I'm ending off with Woman in Power, a Manifesto, which is by Mary Beard, and I read this for class, and that's literally all I have to say about it, is that I read it for class, and it talks about women in power. I'm currently reading 3 books right now, so they may or may not make it onto this January list. Things Fall Apart, again, for class. I'm reading A City Built by Women, I think it's called, by César de Pizan, I want to say. Yikes, and that one's for class as well. And then my non-class read is The New Me by Hallie Butler, and that is, I'm taking my time there because I don't know that I'm fully into it, but I do want to finish it, so that's where we are right now in 2022. 12 books read, 3 books currently being read. It's crazy out here, but don't forget to pick up a book. Reading is fun. I will see you guys next time I see you.